Majority Whip is recognized.
Mr. President, let me say at the outset that I thank the senator from Kentucky for his words on the floor, supportive of assistance to Ukraine in its hour of need, and I thank him for being consistent in that message. Yesterday, after months of delay, 17 Republican senators joined in a bipartisan effort to advance critical security and humanitarian aid. I want to thank them for stepping up and urge them to continue moving this bill to final passage and moving it to passage in the House of Representatives. All the while we're giving our speeches here on the floor of the Senate and other places, Vladimir Putin has been sitting back and waiting for the United States to finally walk away from the Ukrainians as they fight bravely to repel his bloody onslaught. Putin is hoping that Donald Trump will be reelected and that this Congress will discontinue aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, the message man for the MAGA movement, Tucker Carlson, was in Moscow interviewing the former communist KGB agent, Vladimir Putin, hoping no doubt to further his cynical strategy. Is there anyone here who could remotely have imagined that many in the party of Ronald Reagan and John McCain would be actively voting against aid to stop Russian tyranny, that they would bend to the will of a former President Trump who has spoken favorably of the Russian despot? Mr. President, this photograph captures a moment a few years ago. Wrong photograph. Captures a moment 37 years ago at the Brandenburg Gate between East and West Germany, when President Reagan stood resolutely for freedom and told Gorbachev to tear down the wall. Now, this second photograph is more personal to me. About 10 years ago, when Senator John McCain and I were part of a delegation that represented colleagues from Arizona, North Dakota, Rhode Island, and Wyoming, we went to Ukraine's Maidan Square in Kyiv to honor those who had been killed in the fight for freedom. I'm not alone in asking the same question that was asked yesterday by the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. He said, Ronald Reagan, who helped millions of us win back our freedom and independence, must be turning over his grave at what's happening now in Washington. Mr. President, the Polish people are staunch allies of Ukraine and the United States, and they have long memories of Soviet tyranny. They know the critical American resolve is part of overcoming that tyranny, and we should never forget it. I'm proud to represent the city of Chicago and state of Illinois, and there are many Polish Americans there, great people. And I think what they have done during this Ukrainian war is an amazing story. They have literally embraced the refugees from Ukraine. As one of the Polish officials told me, Senator, you won't find a refugee camp for Ukrainians in Poland. We bring them into our homes. It's an amazing outpouring. And when I asked him, what is motivating you? He said, we remember no one would do that for us when we faced the same tyranny in our own history. They've made a difference. It's not just because of their love for their neighbors in Ukraine, but it's also the realization that if Vladimir Putin conquers Ukraine, the next target could easily be Poland or the Baltic nations. They know that this fight, which is being waged against Putin and Ukraine, is their fight. We should realize the same. Next week, a bipartisan group of us are attending the Munich Security Conference. It's an annual conference in Germany where we bring together the European nations and many others to discuss topics of the day. You can bet the number one topic will be Ukraine. God forbid we fail to pass this defense supplemental before the Munich conference. I don't know what I will say to our friends and allies in NATO and in Europe who stood by us and by the Ukrainian people for so long if we abandon them here in the United States Senate. The first question that they will ask is, will we approve the money necessary to buy the ammunition and equipment for the Ukrainians to fight on? We're going to answer that question here in the United States Senate in just a matter of hours. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg recently said that if Putin isn't stopped, he will continue his war beyond Ukraine with grave consequences. And make no mistake, it's not only Putin watching and savoring our failure to act, it's Iran, China, North Korea, and many others. So let's get this done. Let's show Putin and the other tyrants of the world they cannot divide and weaken us at home or with our allies abroad. For months, my Republican colleagues refused to provide critical aid to Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and Taiwan, and to address urgent national security and humanitarian needs until we would consider and pass legislation to secure the American border. This week, we had an opportunity to vote on a bipartisan bill that would help us to secure the border and provide this essential national security funding. I had some concerns about the language in this, but I realized it was a bipartisan compromise. Senator James Lankford, speaking for the Republicans, had been negotiating literally for weeks to get the right language that could appeal to both Democrats and Republicans. I want to thank Senator Murphy and Senator Kirsten Sinbrand for her resolve as well. While I had some concern about the proposal, as I said, I was prepared to support it with some changes. And I'm happy to report that it received the support of the National Border Patrol Council, the union that represents Border Patrol agents. Despite all of this, Senate Republicans said they wanted to offer amendments. Well, the way to offer an amendment is first to pass a motion to proceed to the bill. When that measure came up for support, we didn't have enough Republican support to pass it on the floor. Almost immediately after the bill was released, numerous Senate Republicans had come out in opposition to it. And when the bill came to the floor, they voted not to even consider it. Why? Why? Because Donald Trump told them not to. And he was very bold about it. He said, blame me if you will, but any attempt to make border security changes should be stopped now so he can use the issue in the campaign. He said, blame it on me if the bill fails. Well, we will. Trump is apparently fearful that a bipartisan effort to secure the border would undermine his campaign rhetoric. His interference could not have come at a worse time. We are facing the worst refugee crisis in modern history. With outdated laws and underfunded agencies, our immigration system is not up to the challenge. As a result, many migrants are stuck in our processing backlogs for years without a work permit. Mr. President, most people don't know this fact, but I want to make it for the record. We have had about 36,000 migrants come into the city of Chicago, primarily from Texas. They were sent there under false pretenses, that there was accommodations waiting and a job waiting for them. That was not the case, but the governor of Texas didn't care, and he didn't care about their outcome and their plight. 36,000 trying to find shelter for them. Some went to police stations and slept on the floor. Some slept in churches. The Catholic Charities did an amazing job, as well as many others, to try to take care of them. And it's been a real hardship on the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. 36,000 people. Mr. President, there's one thing that most people don't realize. In the past year and a half, we have absorbed in Chicago 30,000 Ukrainian immigrants who've come from war-torn Ukraine to the city of Chicago. Now, I hope you can understand that a city that has a section known as Ukrainian Village certainly welcomes these people. The families that sponsored them said that they would stand by them, and they became part of our society and part of our economy quickly, without a lot of rancor, and with the understanding of people that they were going to add to America, and they were in desperate need. 30,000 Ukrainians absorbed into Chicago without much fanfare. I've seen them at their churches and their schools, working in restaurants, doing the kind of work that immigrants are used to doing in America. But the 36,000 who came in as migrants from Texas were sent in by the busload without any warning and without any effort to try to assimilate them into the area before they arrived. The difference is very stark. The legislation that we were going to consider before the Republicans killed it would have created a new system to process migrants quickly. It would have funded our frontline officials and immigration officers with $20 billion to ensure that they are processed efficiently. Think about that. The Republicans have been saying publicly for months that we need more resources at the border to stop the onslaught of people who are arriving. And they also believe, and I share the belief, that we need more surveillance at the border, not only for those coming across the border, but also for those bringing across the border narcotics and other contraband dangerous to America. So the bill, which they stopped this week with their vote on the floor, would have provided $20 billion to ensure that they would be processing efficiently at the border and preparing $20 billion at least in new technology and resources to stop the onslaught of narcotics and drugs. It would have ensured that asylum seekers with legitimate claims could get a work permit quickly and start working, as so many businesses across the nation need. Despite my concerns about this legislation, because it left out dreamers, I was prepared to consider it and support it. The DREAM Act was a measure that I introduced some 22 years ago in an effort to give these young people who were brought to this country by their parents and who grew up here and became part of America a chance to finally prove themselves, to earn their way into citizenship. I think it should be included in any measure that addresses immigration from this point forward. I hope we can all agree on one thing. We need to work together in a bipartisan way to secure the border after years of congressional failure. Bipartisanship requires compromise. After all of their Senate Republicans' TV appearances, campaign photos at the border, and impassioned speeches on the floor, it only took one man to destroy this agreement, this hard-fought bipartisan agreement, Donald Trump. I know my Republican colleagues understand the urgent need to secure the border. I'm disappointed that they would let their fear of one man stop this body from doing its job. Mr. President, we still have a chance to do the right thing when it comes to security. We can stand behind the people in Ukraine who are fighting bravely every single day. I cannot imagine how America can explain to the world why it would walk away from this battle against Vladimir Putin. We know his ambitions beyond Ukraine are terrible, and innocent people will suffer. Let's let the Ukrainian soldiers fight bravely with our support with a vote in the Senate today. I yield the floor.